Warm welcome to everybody joining us today. Delighted to see so many of you join for our lunchtime session today. So we've got our GIRFEC refresh. What does this mean for me? So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to be hearing from people who have been very close to their involvement in the GIRFEC refresh, which will be coming our way very soon. And we've got a fantastic panel who are going to be answering some questions for us. So during the session, we plan to ask some of our panel members, and so we've got panel members, we've got some young people with us today, we've got some local authority staff, we've got some school staff with us today, and they're going to be telling us about how they've been involved in the GIRFEC refresh and what the changes are going to mean for them as we go forward. So facilitating the conversation and the discussion today, I've got Sarah Corbett, who's going to give us a quick wave just now. Sarah's from Scottish GIRFEC. She's from the GIRFEC team at Scottish Government. And also with Sarah, we've got Deborah and Helen, who will be supporting the discussion today. And I'll also be keeping an eye on the chat function during the session for any questions or comments that anybody might have. So just by way of reminder, if you don't mind, if you're not part of the panel, if you keep your mic muted and your camera off, it helps us for the recording to ensure that we get the best broadband bandwidth for our session as we go through, and I'm going to pop my camera off as well because I've had a terrible time this morning with my connection, so I'm just fingers crossed I'm able to stay for the session. So yes, any questions that anybody has, please feel free to pop them into the chat function, and without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sarah, who's going to introduce you to the rest of our panel members for today. So thanks, Sarah.
Thanks very much, Lorna, and thanks everyone for coming along to this session. It's what a fantastic turnout. Thank you for joining us on your lunch breaks. In addition to myself, Helen and Deborah from Scottish Government, we're joined by David from Unthank Primary School, Ruby from Lickety Spit Theatre Company, and Martin from South Ayrshire. We're going to be putting some questions to them in just a few moments. I'm just going to quickly, and I really don't think it'll take more than about 5 minutes, and hopefully people will find it interesting. I'm just going to quickly zip through a little bit about where we are with the refresh of GIRFEC materials and how we got there. I do have previous for clicking leave when I meant to click share. So I will just bring up the right slides and I'll whip through that. Slideshow from beginning. Fab.
That's great. We can see that, Sarah. That's fabulous.
Great. So in terms of the way that we developed the guidance, we had co-production working groups. We had a number of different groups that were working on different bits of the guidance, and all of those groups included representatives from education, social work, NHS health boards, from third sector and from national organisations. There was also engagement with a wide range of children and young people, and that was done through organisations that already had relationships with children and young people. And they were seeking the children and young people's views on the values and principles of GIRFEC and the Information Sharing Charter. And that was incredibly useful. So we'll hear a bit more about that later on. There was a public consultation on the assessment and wellbeing guidance, and there was some stakeholder focused engagement with a huge number of stakeholders on the other refresh materials. So one of the main things that we want to get across is when we talk about the GIRFEC refresh, almost all of you here today listening are already doing GIRFEC, and there's no major change in the way that GIRFEC is done. We're not talking about any big changes. In terms of the guidance, there's a bit of a shift in the language and the tone, and some things have come to the fore, and for the most part those are things that have come to the fore over the most recent years in any case, and was absolutely due an update within the GIRFEC materials. We're talking about children and young people rather than talking about children and child a lot through the documents. We've found that after a certain age, young people didn't really identify with the term children. They didn't feel like it was talking about them or talking to them. We've aimed for simpler language, throughout the whole suite of documents. So this is something that hopefully, for the most part, that you could look at with a family, with children, with young people, and as far as possible, it will make sense to them. We've avoided technical language in a couple of places. It's really hard to avoid, particularly with information sharing. It's really hard not to talk about technicalities, but we have tried to keep it as simple as possible. We've avoided stigmatizing language, and that required a lot of thought, because obviously we don't intend to stigmatize anyone in the GIRFEC materials, but with some help from the Each and Every Child initiative, we understood that there was ways that we could reframe the language to make it more positive and more inclusive. There's an emphasis right across the piece on working together. There's more emphasis on being child-centred, rights-respecting, on strengths-based practice, and including children, young people and their families at every stage of the process. So the new materials, the refreshed materials, make it clear that the named person continues to be delivered is on a policy basis rather than a legislative basis. And again, that is the way that people have been delivering GIRFEC for years. We recognise that the role and function of the named person can have different names in different parts of the country. There's no attempt to alter that. That's quite well embedded. So we've not attempted any change to that. So we're clarifying where the guidance is policy and not legislation. There's clarity, for example, on who can be a lead professional and on the interface between the named person and the lead professional roles. There's cross-policy links made across the whole suite of documents. So we talk about the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, National Child Protection Guidance published in 2021, the role of children's services planning partnerships, the promise, again, that was something that's in the policy landscape that absolutely had to be taken account of, tackling child poverty, additional support for learning, getting it right for brothers and sisters, trauma-informed practice and whole family wellbeing. In terms of changes, I'm just going to highlight a few things in the information sharing guidance because I know that's something that some people were particularly keen to see. So we're clarifying that the role of the named person, it doesn't create any additional authority to obtain information. But a lot of people who are named a named person, it will be part of their existing role to process information, and they may have a responsibility to process information, but the named person role itself is not adding to that. Throughout the information sharing guidance, we've really emphasised the importance of sharing necessary information with appropriate agencies if there's significant concerns about a child or young person, and that's always in compliance with data protection legislation, and that legislation does not present a barrier, to genuine concerns about a child or young person's well-being. There's a strong emphasis on building trusting relationships. Sorry, the lights have gone out because I'm not moving enough, and being transparent with children, young people and families. And there's more clarity for independent and third sector organisations. We gave a lot of thought to smaller voluntary and community organisations that are so important in the well-being of children and young people and having really positive relationships with them, and but they're going to have a different approach to information sharing where they're not part of they don't have Caldecott guardians, they don't necessarily have a big framework to fit into. We now have the information sharing charters. In fact, in response to what we heard from children and young people, we have one that's aimed at children and young people and one that is aimed at parents and carers. We tested the language with children and young people and made a lot of changes from there. And that is the end of the slides. Again, stop sharing, but Sarah, don't leave the meeting. I've done that before. So what I'll do now, okay, we're quite good for time. What I'll do now is I'm going to ask each of the guest panel members that have joined us some questions. I'm going to start with Ruby. Hope that's all right with you, Ruby. Do you want to just start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your involvement in the GIRFEC refresh?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. So yeah, my name's Ruby Zajac, and I'm a creative producer with Lickety Spit Theatre and Play Company, and we're an organisation that's been working since 2004, developing an approach called Story Play, which has been developed entirely with children and families, particularly 3 to 8 year olds, and we consult children about all of our work, and that led us to start delivering consultation sessions for the government, and where we use story play, games, rhymes, songs and imaginary play to find out what children think about issues and policies and different things that affect them. So I was on one of the working groups myself, the Values and Principles working group, and then from that developed some consultation sessions with some of the children that we work with, who were sort of 5 to 12, and those were to consult the children on the values and principles and the information sharing charter, as Sarah said. So that kind of fed in to the overall refresh, and those children were in the very large majority children who are living in the asylum system, so 95% were refugees or asylum seekers. So yeah, I think that answers that question.
Thanks very much. So what did the children and young people that were working with Lickety Split, tell us about GIRFEC and about the values and principles and information sharing charter?
Sure, yeah. So the games that we played included 3 Craws. Well, it's a song, as I'm sure lots of you know. So for example, we sort of started off with that and we sang it, and we talked about the different barriers that the Craws all face to accessing services they need, or the needs that they have from the adults in their lives. As I'm sure most of you all know, one of the Craws fell and broke his jaw, another one couldn't flee at all, another one was greeting for his maw. And we used rhymes and games like that to talk about the issues within the values and principles. And one of the strongest things that came back from the children was their how much they care about equality and inequality. So we went on a magic ball adventure to a swimming pool, and one of the Craws didn't have enough money to get into the swimming pool, and the children were really concerned about that, and they told us that how unfair that was. You know, they said that it would make someone feel really sad, and there was a 5-year-old saying, oh, I've got 5 big monies, I could give one to them and then they could get in and I would still have 4. And there was another one who couldn't swim very well, and another 5-year-old said, you can go on a floaty or you can put on something so you don't die, you don't drown. So they were really problem solving to kind of help each other to overcome those inequalities. And another thing they talked about in relation to sort of adult support, and they talked about a teacher making sure they spend time and help everyone equally, not just staying with one person. That was an 8-year-old, and a 9-year-old said, an example of when people have been shown equity with all kinds of races is when we are playing football, they are showing teamwork and including everyone. And the final quote I just wanted to share was an 8-year-old who said, when asked about inequality, and that was in relation to one of the particular values and principles, the new one, equitably tackling multiple and intersecting forms of inequality, she said, it's really important because it would make the other people who don't have that thing feel really sad, and it wouldn't really be nice. And another thing is because the law needs to be fair. And I think that the impact of not getting it right for every child on mental health and well-being and sadness and happiness as the ultimate outcomes that children are navigating was something that came across really strongly. But the only other thing I wanted to add is that, you know, we did find that we absolutely had to put these values and principles and the information sharing charter into action through the games, you know. So we played Letter to My Love, and we talked about the letter and the information on it and who could get it and when permission needed to be given for that information to be passed on. And the values and principles themselves were quite inaccessible to the younger children in the language that they have. And although I think that, you know, that language has improved, I think we definitely, you know, what we learned really reinforced our belief that we need to use play to continue to engage with children about these issues.
Thanks very much, Ruby. Just we ourselves within Scottish Government could never ever have dreamt up such an imaginative and engaging approach, and that was the beauty of working with organisations such as yourselves. Is, you know, when we found out about the 3 Craws and the Letter to My Love, I thought it's just genius to sort of frame it in a way that children could actually find it enjoyable, you know, to engage with that. And yes, the wording of the values and principles has changed a lot, and that's largely thanks to what the children and young people told us. So final question for you, Ruby, what difference would you like to see GIRFEC making in the lives of children and young people moving forwards?
I suppose I would like GIRFEC to empower more practitioners across all sectors to use play to actually fulfill the aims of GIRFEC, and to feel that that is a very valid way of meeting children's needs, and that it isn't a light, you know, add-on that play, you know, has perhaps more historically been seen as. But I think I would really like to see it being woven together with the UNCRC and all the work that's been going alongside that for implementation of that, and to continue to make, you know, move forward with what I hope can be a much more inclusive outlook for particularly early years children. And children with additional barriers and needs, such as children experiencing the disadvantages of the hostile environment, and other children for whom, you know, a more standard kind of consultation process won't necessarily garner the same results.
Great, thanks very much. I'm going to move on now to Martin. I can't see your square, but we've got over 100 people on the call now, so I'm hoping that Martin's still around with us somewhere. Could you, Martin, just take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us about your involvement in the GIRFEC refresh?
Hi, I'm Martin. I'm at my school, Belmont Academy in South Ayrshire. I got involved in the GIRFEC refresh through a consultation exercise that was set up by the Champions for Change, South Ayrshire Champions Board. I'm a member of the Champions Board and take part in Champions Board groups in my school and the local community. I get involved with the refresh through the care experience groups I attend with the Champions Board. In December 2021, during the various groups, we were asked to take part in different activities and discussion groups to give our opinions and views on what GIRFEC meant to us. It involved taking part in games, crafts, posters and discussions. It was a relaxed environment as we all knew each other. We spoke about proposed GIRFEC values and standards, the language and images in the GIRFEC materials. I remember having to rank the values and think about what the images meant to me and made me feel.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I'm glad. Well, I hope it wasn't too sort of dry and boring a process for you. If we'd done it ourselves, we probably would have just had people sit in a room and talk, and that would have been pretty miserable. I think. So what did the young people in your group in South Ayrshire what did they have to say about the GIRFEC values and principles and the information sharing? Do you remember?
Well, firstly, nobody knew what GIRFEC was, even though we'd all been linked to the care system and most of us had attended reviews and hearings. But some of us knew about the scenario wheel. I could read and understand the refresh materials, but other young people might not. The language used wasn't the best and easy to read for younger children. Most of it included the values, felt cold. It's meant for us, but we're not involved in what happens. And why are our carers' views prioritised over ours? The images didn't relate well to the language used or clearly represent what the values stood for. They put our two parents, two children as one picture. I know my family doesn't look like that, and neither does many others in my group. So that just makes us feel even more different. Some of us didn't know the kind of support we were getting. During the GIRFEC refresh, got conversations started with myself and other young people, and about it and what else available for young people with care experience. Lots of us spoke about relationships, and we don't think GIRFEC emphasises this enough. The more you know a person, the more you trust them. Without trust, how can you build good relationships? without good relationships, you don't get the right support at the right time.
Thanks very much, Martin. We did go back and make a lot of changes after we looked at the feedback from children and young people. So I really hope that if you look at it again, you'll see an improvement, whether it's still, whether it meets up to what you would like it to be. I don't know, but I really hope that you'll see an improvement. So what difference would you like to see GIRFEC making in the lives of children and young people?
I think that all young people should know about GIRFEC and would want to be involved more. If it's about us, we want to be involved. I think you should use language, words and images that we can relate to. It doesn't feel clinical. Better, more positive relations and more trust. Know about all support available to us and where and when we can use it. We want to stop being treated differently, especially in schools. Our voices are important and we want to be heard. Don't just say it, do it. Actions are important.
That's really, you know, the interesting thing is, although we've not always been great at seeking out the views of children and young people, what the feedback that we got from that whole sort of project was so useful, and when we never share it, it's the bit that everyone wants to hear. I think if I'm looking at the other members of the team, but it's always the bit that energizes people, and people get so much from it. So we really need to get better at how we do that, so that we are hearing the voices of children and young people, because people absolutely want to hear from you. I'm going to move on now to David. Could you just take a moment to introduce yourself, and the first question is, what difference has GIRFEC made in your school?
Hello everyone, my name is David McElraith and I'm the Deputy Head Teacher at Onthank Primary in East Ayrshire Council. And I suppose to give you a bit of background information on our school and our context, we're a school with a school roll of 612 pupils at the moment. So it's a very large school, very busy school, lively and always lots going on. But that equally comes with its challenges in trying to ensure that we do get it right for every child in the school. And our catchment is quite unique as well across Scotland, in that we have around 50% is deciles 1 and 2, and around the other 50% of pupils are 8 and 9. And I believe are possibly one of the schools that's quite unique in that way across the whole of Scotland. There's very few schools with that sort of major difference in deciles. But that comes with loads of strengths, but also comes with loads of challenges as well, and making sure that we have a real feeling of community spirit within the school. And that's something that we've really worked on in helping us to try and ensure we do get it right for every child. With relation to your question, I joined the school 5 to 6 years ago. And at the time when we joined, along with a newly appointed head teacher, the school had plans in place for children. And they were completed, but they were probably completed in isolation, where plans were created by an ASN teacher, or they were created by members of the leadership team, but there didn't seem to be really any sort of ownership or empowerment at that present time given to the class teachers, and they weren't necessarily skilled in a way that you would be hoping to ensure that they are empowered in a way that they can create the plan, they can live the plan and help put that plan in place for that young person. And there was also sort of a lack of multi-agency working. So when we looked at it and we were evaluating it, that's the journey we came on, and I just thought it was important today to sort of explain that first of all. At the moment and now, when you're asking what difference it has made, I had a think last night and I was kind of thinking, what am I going to say and what sort of evidence do I have? But now, as a school, we have a whole staff team who are aware of the policy, they are aware of the GIRFEC agenda, and they have accountability, which wasn't something that we could say was happening necessarily 4 or 5 years ago, if we look back. And that staff have a real awareness of the role of the named person and the lead person, and those people, and having those roles within our school has certainly helped to ensure that there's someone monitoring that process and ensuring that the class teachers classroom assistants and the support staff, and then the agency workers are all taking that responsibility and ownership over the plan for the child to see it through. That for us probably led to a lot of systems being changed within our school, actually on the floor and the day-to-day running of the school, and trying to work out how to put that policy into practice. And that was given a lot of skills, upskilling a lot of staff and making sure there was training and information sessions. We used the training that was offered by East Ayrshire Council, but we also used the training that we created ourselves as a leadership team, and that even now today, we were talking about a GIRFEC refresh, but we have a refresh like every year, going through the child's plans and the ILPs, and even staff who have been completing these for years still feel that they benefit from that refresh and just going over it again. I think it's about, you know, capitalising on that and giving new staff the opportunity to hear about the agenda and how it's going to work for our school, but also then ensuring that people are still has that importance within your own classroom, no matter how long you've been in the classroom for. With regards to upskilling the staff, we looked at, looking at the refresh, it talks about the well-being of the child and the well-being of the family. We were skilled in dyadic developmental practice and psychotherapy, and that's something that the leadership team went on, and then some of our teachers. And we looked at also NME in our classrooms and making the classrooms accessible and environmentally friendly, and looking at those sort of nurture principles. And that was a large area of where we have upskilled our staff team at this moment in time as well, and trying to make that policy come alive within the classrooms. Linked to that was also training that we've done with linked to trauma-informed practice, but also then looking at attendance. And we have systems in place now within the school where if a child's attendance is a concern, they know how to report that to the office staff or to the leadership team, and we try and catch that as early as possible, as opposed to kind of letting it go for a wee bit of time before you know it, you're then at 70% or 60% attendance. So we're really trying to catch that and be really honest with those parents with that. And I suppose when you talked earlier on about seeking the views of children and making sure that the policy was accessible to children, we also did that with our parents linked to attendance. And when I say to parents, you know, we've got 70% attendance, what does that actually mean? And how many days of education is that child missing? So we were putting it down. We found that parents, for example, were finding it easier that way. So if a concern was attendance, we were then saying, well, actually that means they've missed 1 day a week of every week. And that was really important that they were getting that. I'm sorry, there's somebody at my office door. And they've obviously not read the sign. But anyway, I'll keep going. If they stop, I'll get it. We looked at then again a child-centred approach and making sure that we were addressing the wellbeing needs, and looking at the needs within the school and out with the school, and how that could be led with multi-agencies, looking at the work of the psychologists. We had built great relationships with psychologists, and that for us has really been crucial to our being able to change it and make a difference within this school over the past few years. And I suppose going forward, we're looking to work with maybe housing departments and social work in a clearer way, so that we can actually assist with the family. I will finish, sorry, answering your question very soon, but the last part of it for us was the difference that GIRFEC has made into our school is that for anybody who knows our school, we have an enhanced provision within the school, which has only really came to life the last 3 to 4 years, and started off small and sort of addressing the needs within maybe 3 or 4 children within our school, and now we're in a place where it's addressing up to 40 children within our school, and that enhanced provision has been to the Scottish Government and has been approved to be a supported learning centre within the next year. And for us, our assessments and our data gathering and the focus on child's plans and ILPs that we were given within the classrooms, that led to us then identifying and assessing the need within our school and making sure that was a true reflection of what we were seeing day to day. That the paperwork, sorry, was showing a true representation of what we're actually seeing in our classrooms and within our school community. And that did help us then to speak to the authority and to speak to the government and to get our what is now going to be our supported learning centre. So for us, that's been the major difference that's helped us in assessing our needs and putting that in place. So hopefully that'll answer your question.
Thanks very much. I'm sure you said that it was only 5 or 6 years since you joined the team there at the school, so you've covered a huge amount of ground in that time. Now you have had, I know, a quick sneak preview at the new guidance, but I also know there's quite a lot to get through. Are you able to say anything about what changes you think the refresh guidance will mean for your practice?
Yeah, so I suppose when I was looking at the guidance, the main changes were about working together and that emphasis of working together and being child-centred, looking at, you know, the rights-based approach and strengths-based practice. But it was not about just including the children, but also including the families. For anybody who knows On Thank, we try to be a community school and try to make sure we're at the heart of our community. Which we had difficulties with, as I suppose lots of schools did during COVID, and we had to move to online platforms. But before COVID, we really were having community nights and we were having events within the school where it was a more relaxed atmosphere, and we were trying to build a really strong partnership with our parents and with our community, and making sure that they felt they could trust the school and that they were building a relationship. And I found it interesting that Martin actually said that as a pupil and as a young person, he was saying about trust and relationships, and that's where we were going, not just with our young people, but with our parents, and we're trying to make sure that families felt that they belonged. So that's something we're still striving to do, and now that we're out of lockdown and COVID and we're getting people back in the buildings, that's becoming much easier. But I think the reality is that for our school, certainly, there are lots of avenues of support for families, like food banks and financial inclusion teams. But more often than not, the families that are struggling, they're coming to us first because we're the familiar face and we're the face that they're seeing day in and day out. And it's about trying to build on that and capitalise on that. So we were using our community nights we were having within the school, and we would have the families in, and it was about 300 to 400 families we would be having in, doing activities and also having a meal with our catering staff. And then we were then setting up, for example, stations where the financial inclusion team would be there, or we would be setting up stations where it was just more relaxed atmosphere, but there was access to those services and that it wasn't made such of a big issue. And I think that's really important to do that really delicately and really sensitively, that families aren't feeling that they're pressurised into accessing these resources, but that they're there and that they feel that they can access them in a way that is non-intrusive to their situation. Certainly for the changes with the new guidance, looking at my practice and the practice within the school, it's about becoming that team around the child, becoming a team around the family, and looking at the supports that can be offered to the family. I have to be honest, I think that comes with difficulties as well, in that the supports of the agencies, they have to be backed up enough and they have to be well resourced enough to ensure that they can help with that. For example, like social work or health, and I think that always comes with difficulty. But if we get that right, then I think we will be able to ensure that they do help support our families. But one thing within East Ayrshire, anyone who knows East Ayrshire, we're developing the HEART model, and that's about helping everybody at the right time, which is linked to the new guidance. It's a new approach where we're looking at making sure the services are all connected. So health, social work, CAMS, early years practitioners, but then those services are all linked to an education group. And that as much as the young person's getting to build a relationship with these key people, the education departments and the other departments within the authority, they're getting to build those relationships with those departments across the sector and across the authority. And I think that's really important, that we get to build a really good relationship with those agencies, and it's not just picking up the phone and getting who you get necessarily, and that we actually get to build a really clear relationship and a bond, and they get an understanding of our school and they get an understanding of our families, and then we can help and move forward from that. So I think that certainly with East Ayrshire's HEART model, and then looking at being a team around the family and just looking to support the family, would be the biggest change that I think will mean for my practice and the practice within our school.
Excellent. Thanks very much. I'm going to slightly look to Lorna time-wise, because I think we're meant to finish at 1:10. So I'm not sure whether we've got another time for another question for David, if we want to give a chance for anybody that has any questions.
Yep, so I would go ahead just now. There's only one question in the chat just now, and we can respond to that once you're finished the question. I think it's important to hear this final question. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So David, what difference would you like to see GIRFEC making in the lives of children and young people moving forward?
But I suppose it's important, I think, to get the whole picture of the family and the background knowledge of the family and the understanding of that. And I would like to enable my team and the teams across the authority, to be able to set appropriate targets and develop a plan for that family, and having those all linked and about and really involving the family in that and making sure they have ownership of that as well. With East Ayrshire, I would like to see the continued development of HEART. We're at phase 1. There's 4 phases to HEART and helping everybody at the right time. And I would really like to see that through so that we have those allocated workers developing those relationships, and that I would have a key person within social work and within health that I can contact and build that relationship with, so that I can then help the families that we serve within our school, but also so that the families get to build that relationship. And for me, I would like to make sure that that's a sustainable model, and that it's building a relationship with someone who's going to be there for a period of time, that the families can then build a relationship with the young person. And I think that's really important. And I suppose that the last thing that I thought was that I would like to make sure that we were involved in adult services, and that certainly at our school at this moment in time, it's very much helping the child and helping, look at CAMS and look at health and look at social work, but actually looking at housing and looking at addiction services, looking at financial inclusion, and actually getting them on board and them coming to those team around the child or team around the family meetings. And I'm sorry if I've talked too much, but hopefully I'll give someone else a chance now.
No, absolutely. Yeah, it's something that comes up within our discussions, and within, in fact, what's our wider policy teams around us is interpretation of children's services. It's not just the sort of stereotypical children's services that are delivering services for children. It's much wider than that. Like you say, is housing, it's addiction, it's sort of any could be almost any kind of health service for adults. If a parent's health is suffering physically or mentally, that's really likely to have an impact on the child. Try as parents do to protect our children. We're all only human. So Laura, you said there was a question in the chat. We've got a couple of minutes left. Do you have any questions?
Yep, absolutely. So the question in the chat, you will be delighted to hear, is asking about having access to slides.
Yeah, we can share the slides with you. I'll send them over after the meeting.
No, that's great, brilliant. That's great, Sarah. And obviously we'll have a recording of this session, so you'll be able to access the initial part of the session as well. I can't see any other questions. Mrs. Scott, if you would like to contact me directly, I'm happy to get those slides for you so that you have them. And wonderful point about HEART model and linking to adult services to help the whole family. So many incredibly powerful messages from our panel members today, demonstrating how the GIRFEC refresh, although there are changes in there, that actually what is at the heart of all of it, and that always has been at the heart of GIRFEC, is relationships. That's the clear message I've heard coming through from all of our panel members today, is the importance that we have, the importance of that relationship that we have with the child, the young person, the family, to support, to give them the right help at the right time from the right people. So really, really powerful session today. I'm delighted so many people were able to come and join our session, and hopefully people will be able to access this afterwards as well. So I don't see any other questions in the chat. You are welcome to get back in touch with us afterwards if you've got any other questions or comments for the panel members. But for the time being, I just want to say a massive thank you to Sarah, to Helen, to Deborah from the team at Scottish Government for pulling this panel together and pulling our session together, and very much looking forward to the refresh and its publication to get that sneaky peek to the publication when it's ready. And obviously a huge thank you to Martin, to David, and to and to Ruby as well for sharing their stories about their involvement and what they see as GIRFEC making a difference for our children and young people. One quick question before we finish from Georgette. Any idea when the refresh will be available for us all to see?
Oh yeah, that's the golden question, isn't it? We said at another event recently, we're pretty confident it'll be this side of the school October break. We're just a little bit nervous because we had a few issues with publishers when we were coming up to consultation, so we didn't want to say a date and then fail to meet it. But it's very close now, and we'll be telling everybody. And then we'll maybe go for a drink.
And we will be sharing as well. We'll be sharing as widely and broadly as we possibly can as well. So massive thanks to everybody, and especially to our panel members for their open and honest discussion today. And thank you to everybody who joined our session today and taking the time over lunchtime to join us. So thanks again, everyone, and take care and enjoy the rest of your SLF.